the gavel hit like a gunshot. Willow Junction's traveling courtroom was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with sweat, dust, and the kind of silence people only share when they want to see blood made legal. "Wade Harker," Judge Griffin Blackthorn said, voice flat as iron, "you are convicted of trafficking women, forced marriage contracts, and assault. Sentence: death, carried out immediately." A wave of sound surged through the room, not cheers exactly, more like relief with teeth. Then Wade threw his head back and screamed, "The marriage contract still stands!" The noise died so fast it felt like the world inhaled and forgot how to exhale. He twisted toward the witness bench, toward Lenora Ashwood, the young woman with trembling hands and a body the town loved to mock. Her eyes were red, her shoulders curled inward as if she could shrink out of the law's reach. "You hear that, Nora?" Wade spat. "She signed. She's my wife by paper. When I die, she becomes a widow. And under widow law, she goes back to my family. My kin will come for their property." Nora's breath caught. Around her, a few people shifted uncomfortably, not because they cared, because they understood he might be right. A flash, less than a heartbeat, a cabin at night. Nora's back against a wall, voice cracking. You're huge." A mountain of a man in the lamplight, not advancing, just holding her gaze. "Look at me." Back to the courtroom. Judge Blackthorn stepped down from the bench. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He walked straight to Nora and dropped to one knee in the middle of the aisle as if the room itself had become a battlefield, and this was where he chose to stand. "Lenora Ashwood," he said, loud enough for every whisper to choke, "if widow law is a trap, then I will cut it with something stronger than fear. Marry me, here, now." The clerk's pen froze. The sheriff stared like he'd forgotten how to blink. Wade's grin faltered, just for a second, because this was not mercy. This was a judge turning his own body into a shield. And the most dangerous part was not Wade's death. It was what would arrive after it, because the moment Wade stopped breathing, his family would ride in to claim what they believed belonged to them. Before we rewind 3 days to learn why Nora was sold and why Griff had to marry her inside a courtroom, tell me, where are you right now, and what are you doing as this story begins? Willow Junction liked to call itself civilized. It had a saloon with real glass windows, a church with a bell imported from St. Louis, and a courthouse that doubled as a dance hall on Saturdays. But law here was thinner than paper. What truly ruled the town was reputation, money, and the steady weight of a gun resting low on a hip. The only thing that made traffickers hesitate before riding through town was the traveling court. When Circuit Judge Griffin Blackthorn arrived, even the boldest men adjusted their tone. Griff did not smile easily. He did not drink in public. He did not stay long after verdicts were carried out. He moved from town to town like a blade, precise and unsentimental. People called him fair. They also called him cold. He preferred that. He wore the law like armor, every motion measured, every word exact. He believed in written statutes because human kindness was too inconsistent to trust. Yet, when Mrs. Martha Ellery had knocked on his rented office door 3 days earlier, voice shaken as she described a young woman locked behind iron bars in Wade Harker's house, something in Griff had shifted. He had not asked for proof first. He had stood. That was the first crack. Nora Ashwood had never been considered important enough to cause cracks in anything. She was 22, broad-shouldered and soft in places the town enjoyed whispering about. Men called her heavy, women called her careless. Our children copied what they heard. No one called her by her full name unless they were scolding her. She had been passed from loss to loss. Parents buried when she was 8. A violent uncle who discovered quickly that a frightened girl could be turned into money. Then Wade Harker, who dressed coercion in paperwork and called it marriage. In Willow Junction, contracts carried weight, especially when the signer could not read every clause. The sheriff preferred quiet streets to messy truths. Best not stir up trouble, he often said. The clerk cared about clean ledgers more than bruised wrists, and Mrs. Tully, the loudest wife in town, spoke endlessly about morality while insisting Nora must have led that poor man on. Then there was Frank Dobbins, a traitor with a mouth sharp enough to cut rope. When Griff first mentioned voiding the marriage contract, Frank had laughed openly. "Who's going to marry her?" he said, glancing at Nora like she was livestock at auction. "No offense. A girl? Just facts." Griff had not responded aloud, but he had remembered. 3 days before the execution, when Griff and the sheriff forced open Wade's house, they found the iron cage in the back room. Not for animals, for Nora. She had flinched from Griff's size at first. He was tall, built like someone who had learned early that strength could be both shield and weapon. He had lowered himself slowly, deliberately, until they were eye level. "I will not touch you," he had said. That was the second crack, and now Wade was dead. But Willow Junction was not finished with Nora, because in a town where paper outranked conscience, widow law still lingered like a trap waiting to snap. And Griff knew something the others did not. The Harker family did not lose property quietly. The sound that never left Griffin Blackthorn was not a scream. It was the echo of a door swinging in the wind. He had returned home too late that night in Denver 10 years ago. Too late to stop the man he had sentenced from slipping through the cracks of the system. Too late to prevent retaliation. Caroline had been alive when he left for court that morning, laughing softly as she pinned up her hair, teasing him about how serious he looked even over breakfast. By dusk she was gone. He remembered kneeling beside her on the wooden floor, remembered how warm her hand still felt, remembered thinking that law, for all its structure and Latin phrases and stamped seals, Adi had not moved fast enough to save the one person he loved. The gavel, the wind, his own breathing. After that, Griff reshaped himself into something harder. He left Denver and the life that carried too many ghosts. He became a circuit judge, riding from settlement to settlement, determined that no predator would slip through because he hesitated again. Law became more than duty. It became penance. If he could not save Caroline, he would not fail another woman. When Mrs. Martha described Nora locked in iron, he felt the old heat behind his ribs, the same cold certainty, not again. Nora's past had no dramatic courtroom scene, no final words, just erosion. Her parents died of fever within a month of each other. Her Uncle Vernon took her in, loudly proclaiming Christian charity while quietly pocketing the church stipend meant for her schooling. She learned early that silence kept bruises smaller. By 16, she did the cooking, the cleaning, the hauling of water. And by 18, she understood that Vernon saw her not as kin, but as leverage. When Wade Harker arrived offering $150 for a marriage arrangement, Vernon signed faster than Nora could protest. She had been told it was security. She had been told wives obeyed. She had been told she was fortunate anyone wanted her. The contract used words like provision and protection. It did not mention cages. In the days leading up to the trial, Griff explained to her that a contract signed under coercion could be voided, that physical confinement proved duress, that Colorado territorial law, though flawed, still recognized forced consent as invalid. Nora listened carefully. She asked questions. Her fear did not vanish, but it shifted. For the first time, she saw the possibility that the law might be something other than a weapon used against her. Still, one clause troubled Griff. Under certain territorial interpretations, a widow could be claimed by her husband's family for property reconciliation if marriage was considered legally consummated. Wade had been shouting about that clause in court. Most people in Willow Junction did not understand the nuance. They heard only widow. They heard only ownership. And they believed it. Nora believed it too. "You can't protect me forever," she whispered once as they prepared testimony the night before trial. Griff did not answer immediately, because he had already begun reading the statute again, searching for a line, a word, a loophole that might become a shield. Nora did not know yet that she had a choice hidden inside that same law. And when Wade screamed about widow rights in court, she did not know Griff had already made his decision. Not out of impulse, but out of calculation, and perhaps something more dangerous. 3 days before the execution, the air inside Wade Harker's house had smelled of stale liquor and rust. Mrs. Martha had stood behind Griff on the porch, clutching her shawl so tightly her knuckles turned white. The sheriff hesitated before kicking in the door, muttering about warrants and paperwork. Griff did not hesitate. Inside, the back room held the iron cage, not large, not elaborate, just enough space to stand or curl on the floor. When Griff approached, Nora scrambled backward, palms up as if bracing for a blow. He stopped several feet away. Then, deliberately, he lowered himself to one knee. He removed his gloves. "I will not touch you," he said quietly. "You are not under arrest. You are not property. You are a witness." That distinction mattered. It was the first time anyone had named her something other than possession. Wade, dragged in from the saloon later that afternoon, spat accusations the entire walk to jail. He produced the marriage contract proudly, waving it as though ink were armor. "She signed," he insisted, "legal and binding." The paper bore a seal. It bore Nora's shaky signature. It bore witnesses who would later claim they had seen nothing unusual. But Griff saw the bruises on Nora's wrists, saw the thin mattress inside the cage, saw the lock bolted from the outside. Duress. He began building the case immediately. Sheriff Keller worried about stirring up the Harker family. "They've got cousins north of here," he warned. "Men who don't like embarrassment." "Mrs." Tully whispered that Nora should be grateful someone wanted to marry her at all. Frank Dobbins declared publicly that contracts were contracts, and feelings had nothing to do with law. Griff ignored them. What he could not ignore was the risk that voiding the contract might not be enough. In the holding cell, Wade leaned close to the bars and smiled. "You void it. She's a widow," he said softly. "You hang me. My brothers claim her. Widow reconciliation. Oh, it's written plain." The clause was obscure, but not imaginary. If a marriage stood uncontested at death, the wife could fall under family guardianship until remarriage. Griff needed Nora to testify that the marriage had never been freely entered, that it had never been consummated, that it was a prison, not a union. But testimony required courage, and courage required trust. That night, in the small office behind the courtroom, Griff laid out the choice clearly. "If you speak," he told her, while keeping distance so she would not feel cornered. "The contract can be voided for coercion, but Harker's family will not accept humiliation quietly." "And if I don't speak?" Nora asked. "They keep you?" Silence stretched between them. Nora's hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I will testify." That was the deal. He needed her voice in court. She needed the law to become a shield. What neither of them said aloud was this: the trial would not be the final battle. The final battle would begin after the sentence was carried out. Day -3. The cage door opened. That was the first sound Nora remembered clearly. Metal scraping against metal. The hinge groaning. Sunlight hitting her face after hours of dimness. She did not look up at Griff when he offered his hand. She stared at his boots. He withdrew the gesture immediately and stepped aside instead. "You can walk," he said. "No one will touch you." She walked. That first day, and paper outlived rope. Griff did not paper outlived rope. Griff did not respond. His mission was singular: keep Nora alive until trial. Threats began before sunset. A stone through the boarding house window. A note pinned to the door. Widow by law. Sheriff Keller increased patrols, but his tone shifted from duty to irritation. "This is stirring trouble," he muttered. "People don't like change." Griff placed Nora in a room above the courthouse instead, closer to him, harder to reach. He slept in a chair outside her door. She did not ask him to. Day -2, preparation. Griff reviewed the contract clause by clause with her. He did not soften the language. He did not dramatize it. He explained. "You were threatened?" "Yes." "Physically restrained?" "Yes." "Denied freedom of movement?" "Yes." "Did you consent freely?" "No." Each answer strengthened the case. But by afternoon, Wade's allies began circling. Mrs. Tully visited with forced sweetness, urging Nora to reconsider. "A woman alone doesn't fare well," she warned. "A widow, even worse." Frank Dobbins cornered Nora outside the bakery. "Contracts are sacred," he said. "Break one, you break order." That night, a rider appeared at the edge of town, a Harker cousin. He did not enter. He watched. Nora saw him from the courthouse window. "I'm making this worse," she whispered. "You are making it visible," Griff replied. She dared to glance at his face then, only for a second. He was not angry. He was resolute. Day -1. Psychological warfare. Wade was allowed a final statement before trial proceedings. He used it well. "She was fed," he said loudly, "clothed, housed. Ask her if her uncle did better." The implication lingered. Griff felt Nora shrink beside him. Wade leaned forward. "She signed," he said softly, "and she'll sign again." The courtroom murmured. Griff banged the gavel once. Silence, but Nora's hand shook for hours afterward. That evening, Griff found her seated alone in the back of the courtroom, staring at the witness stand. "What if they believe him?" she asked. "They won't." "You sound certain." "I am." "Why?" He held her gaze deliberately this time, because truth does not need decoration. Trial day. The courtroom overflowed. Nora testified. Her voice cracked only once, when she described the cage. When Griff asked if she had entered the marriage willingly, she lifted her chin. No. The contract was examined. Witnesses faltered under questioning. The seal was legitimate. The consent was not. Griff ruled the contract void for coercion. Gasps. Wade lunged against his restraints and screamed about widow law. Sentence followed swiftly. Execution scheduled. That should have ended it. It did not. Night 1. After the hanging, Griff escorted Nora to his cabin. Marriage occurred in the courtroom to block the widow clause before Harker kin could file claim. It was procedural, necessary, cold. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked softly. Nora stood near the wall, eyes wide. "You're huge," she whispered. It was not insult. It was fear. Griff removed his coat slowly. "I will not touch you," he said. "Not unless you ask." "But we're married. That grants me protection over you, not ownership." He placed a blanket on the bed. "I will sleep on the floor." Her shoulders sagged with something close to disbelief. Week 2, safety proved false. Whispers followed Nora through town. Widow fraud, opportunist, seductress of a judge. Harker relatives attempted informal claim petitions. None held legal weight, but they created pressure. Sheriff Keller advised compromise. "Maybe let her stay quiet for a spell," he suggested. "Out of sight." Griff refused. Nora began studying law in the evenings. At first, out of necessity. Then, out of curiosity. She learned what guardianship meant, what consent required, what signatures could and could not bind. Knowledge altered posture. She began looking people in the eye. Month 2. She asked Griff to teach her how to hold a firearm properly. He showed her. Without touching her hands, she adjusted on her own. Frank Dobbins stopped laughing after she corrected him publicly about inheritance statutes. Mrs. Tully ceased offering advice. The Harker cousins grew quieter. But the town did not forget. Safety remained conditional. Month 6. The confrontation came on Main Street. A Harker brother blocked Nora's path. "Widow," he said, "paper won't save you forever." Griff arrived seconds later. He did not draw his weapon. He stepped between them. Then he did something he had done only twice before. He lowered himself slightly, bringing his eyes level with Nora's. "Look at me," he said. She did, steady, breathing slow, not shrinking, not hiding. "Do you wish to go with him?" Griff asked calmly. "No." The brother hesitated. Griff turned to him. "You heard her." The moment held, then broke. The man stepped aside. The power was not in Griff's size. It was in Nora's answer. But the law is only as strong as the people willing to stand behind it. And Willow Junction had not finished testing them yet. It did not break in the street. It broke in the quiet. Late autumn. Wind scraping against the cabin walls. Fire low. Nora had grown stronger over months. She read statutes beside Griff in the evenings. She walked through town without lowering her gaze. She could recite the widow clause from memory and explain why coercion voided consent under territorial law. But strength does not erase doubt. That night she found a wooden box beneath Griff's desk while searching for sealing wax. Inside lay letters tied in twine. Carolyn. She did not mean to read them. She read one. The handwriting was soft, affectionate, full of the kind of trust that does not question whether it is loved back. Nora replaced the letter carefully. When Griff returned from the courthouse, she was standing near the door. "Was I," she asked quietly, "ever anything more than a correction?" He stopped. "I don't understand." "You lost her," Nora continued, "because you were too late." Silence stretched. "You married me," she said, "because you refused to be late again." The words landed with precision. Griff did not deny it. "That was part of it," he said at last. "The truth was heavier than a lie." Nora nodded slowly. "So I am not a wife," she whispered. "I am atonement." The accusation did not carry anger, only ache. Griff stepped closer but did not touch her. "I married you because the law demanded speed," he said. "But I stayed because I saw courage." She looked at him, searching. "Courage is useful," she replied. "It is not love." The wind pressed against the cabin door. For the first time since the trial, Nora felt small again. "I cannot live as someone's redemption," she said. "I would rather leave." The words frightened him more than Wade's threats ever had. "Leave?" he repeated. "Yes. If you go, the Harkers will circle again." "I know. And you would risk that?" "I risked worse before I met you." That stopped him. Griff realized something then that law had never taught him. Protection without vulnerability is still control. He moved to the table and sat down, lowering himself deliberately. "Nora," he said quietly, "I failed Caroline. I believed justice would keep her safe. It did not. I built my life around preventing that failure from repeating." She remained by the door. "When I saw you in that cage," he continued, "I saw the same clock running. I could not endure another moment of delay." "That is not the same as choosing me," she said. He lifted his gaze. "I choose you now. Not from urgency, not from guilt, from clarity." "If you walk out that door," he said, "I will not stop you. I will not follow, because you are not my obligation. You are my equal." The fire shifted. Minutes passed. Nora's hand rested on the latch. Then she released it. She crossed the room slowly. This time she knelt, level with him. "Do you see me?" she asked. "Yes." "As myself?" "Yes." "Not as a memory?" "No." Silence softened. "I will not be Caroline," she said. "I do not want you to be." She studied him for deception, found none. And then, for the first time, permanently, and for the first time, Nora permanently, and for the first time, Nora did not feel rescued. She felt chosen. It happened on Main Street, midday, wind cutting dust through Willow Junction. The courthouse doors opened behind them, the wagon south leaving within the hour. Harker's brothers did not come quietly. 4 men, same eyes, same arrogance, paper in hand. "We're here to collect," the eldest said. "Widow reconciliation under territorial custom. She married into our blood." The crowd gathered quickly. Sheriff Keller hovered near the steps, uncomfortable but uncertain. Mrs. Tully whispered loudly about propriety. Frank Dobbins folded his arms with anticipation. Griff stood beside Nora, not in front of her. That alone unsettled the brothers. "You married her under duress of spectacle," one sneered. "Voidable." "The court validated it," Griff replied evenly. "The court bends. And so do men who mistake ownership for law." The eldest Harker stepped forward. "You think you can rewrite custom?" "I think," Griff answered, "that custom ends where consent begins." The brothers advanced a step. So did the tension. Sheriff Keller cleared his throat but did not intervene. The eldest lifted the paper. "She was purchased. That signature binds." Nora felt the old tremor begin in her chest. Purchased. Bound. Owned. Griff glanced at her, but did not speak for her. He waited. The eldest reached toward her wrist. Reflex tightened her shoulders. Griff did not move. Instead, he lowered himself. In the center of Main Street, he went down to one knee. The town gasped. The brothers paused. Griff did not look at them. He looked only at Nora. "Look at me," he said quietly. The phrase struck her like memory. Cabin walls, firelight, fear. "You're huge. Look at me." Now again. The world narrowed to his eyes. "I will not decide this for you," he said. "I will not fight for you if you do not choose to stand." The wind shifted. The brothers waited for her to shrink. The crowd waited for Griff to command. Instead, he waited for her. Her breathing steadied. The iron cage flickered in her mind. The courtroom, the contract torn in half, the night she almost left. She lifted her chin. "I am not property," she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected. "I was coerced. That contract was voided. I married Griffin Blackthorn of my own will, and I remain by my own will." The eldest Harker scoffed. "You think your words outrank ours?" She stepped forward. "One more step toward me," she said clearly, "and I will charge you with intimidation of a court officer's spouse and attempted unlawful seizure." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Keller finally straightened. "Careful," he warned the brothers. Frank Dobbins looked away. Mrs. Tully fell silent. The eldest jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." "Perhaps," Nora replied, "but I will regret silence more." The standoff stretched. Then, slowly, the brothers stepped back, not defeated by fists, but by refusal. Griff rose only after they mounted their horses. He did not touch her immediately. She turned to him first. "I choose," she said. He nodded. "No one else does." The wagon bell rang in the distance. Life resumed its ordinary noise. But something fundamental had shifted in Willow Junction. A woman had spoken in the center of town, and no one had silenced her. The change did not come with applause. It came with quiet. In the days following the confrontation, Willow Junction adjusted its tone carefully. Sheriff Keller began addressing Nora by name rather than by reference. Mrs. Tully stopped whispering when Nora entered a room. Frank Dobbins avoided her eyes entirely. Respect did not arrive as affection. It arrived as space. Space no one tried to invade. The Harker brothers did not return. Word traveled along the circuit that Judge Blackthorn had sealed the voiding order with a territorial filing in Denver, closing any claim under widow reconciliation. The receipt bore the official stamp. Final, recorded. Nora requested a copy. She placed it in a wooden drawer beside her own notes on property law, not because she feared being taken again, but because knowledge, she had learned, was another form of protection. Dick Griff changed too. Less thunder, more listening. He still carried the gavel with authority, still rode from town to deliver sentences. But at home he paused before speaking. He asked before assuming. And sometimes, in the quiet after supper, he would look at her the way he had in the street, not as obligation, not as atonement, but as choice. The cabin no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a beginning. On the frontier, strength is often mistaken for volume or fists, or who can draw faster. But sometimes strength is the man who kneels instead of commands. Sometimes it is the woman who lifts her chin and says, "I choose." Law can wound when it is twisted into ownership. Yet in the hands of someone willing to use it to protect rather than possess, it can become a shield. Nora did not escape because she was rescued. She escaped because she was given the right to decide, and she took it. If you were Nora, would you sign a marriage to survive? Or choose freedom and face the Harker family alone? And right now, where are you? And what are you doing as this story ends?